Welcome to NASCA's Top 10 Priorities for 2021. I'm Brian DeForest, the Chief Administrative Officer for the state of Oregon, coming to you from the capital, Salem. We're joined today by my good friend, Brom Stibitz from the state of Michigan. Brom joins us to talk about space optimization, what our footprint looks like in the future, and how we deliver services in this post-COVID world, where hybrid workspaces are becoming the norm. We look forward to listening to Brom and his insights as we continue our journey to improve state governments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so back in the building again. It's been a while.
Boy, this looks really different than it would have 14 months ago. We would have had people congregating around the front desk. We would have had people in the waiting room. That conference room, as you know, is almost always full on a daily basis. Looks totally different. We would have had a lot more lights on 14 months ago as well.
Yeah, so it is a little bit weird not having people in here, but also probably provides us a little opportunity too.
I think it's a huge opportunity for us. So as we think about remote work and what the future of work looks like for state employees, we need to be reimagining the space. The old style of space design doesn't make sense anymore, and it's a huge opportunity for us because the space is empty. So normally when we restack space, we have to move all the people out temporarily to swing space and restack and bring them back. Well, right now the floors are empty, so this really helps us out. It gives us kind of a blank slate to work with as we reimagine space for the future.
Yeah, well, let's go sit down and talk about that a little bit more, because I think it's intriguing.
Good. I'd love to.
I'm Caleb Buhs, Communications Director for the Michigan Department of Technology, Management, and Budget, and I'm here today with the Director of our department, Brom Stibitz. Welcome, Brom.
Good morning. Thank you.
We're coming to you today from our offices in Lansing, Michigan, and we are currently in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is going to lead a lot of what our discussion is about today. While a majority of our state employees here in Michigan are still working from home, we do have plans underway for a major shift in how our physical work locations will look. And that's what we want to talk about here today. Before we can get into that, though, I think we got to dive a little bit into how we manage space in Michigan and what some of our strategies were pre-pandemic to really set the stage for how we look towards the future. And with that, we might as well jump right into it. So, Brom, what does DTMB do, and what are some of the goals for space optimization that we had pre-pandemic?
Sure. Well, our department's very similar to the departments that other NASCA members have. We provide a number of services, administrative services, for all state government agencies. So this includes things like IT, procurement, fleet, print and mail, and most importantly for our conversation today, facilities services. So we provide a very broad range of services, and the idea here is, much like any centralized service provider, the idea is that we can create economies of scale so that we can provide those services more efficiently, and that we can also, by combining all those services into one agency, we can really become experts in those services and provide better services to the agencies.
Okay. Now, I think to help provide a little context for our audience here, what is the overall size of our footprint?
Yeah, sure. It's pretty big, I would say. You know, DTMB is helping provide space for almost 50,000 state employees. And so when you look at that, DTMB owns and maintains nearly 12 million square feet of space across 42 buildings. Now, those are the owned and operated buildings. In addition to that, we manage leases for another 5 million square feet of space for state agencies.
All right, so prior to March of 2020, when COVID pretty much changed everything we know about everything, what were your major goals around facilities and more specifically space optimization?
Yeah, well, you know, generally speaking, it's like any service we provide. We want to save money, so you want to create efficiencies. But we want to do that while providing the best possible service we can to our customers. So specifically with space, you know, we've had a stated goal of reducing the state's real estate footprint. And so since 2010, we've actually reduced 79 leases out of our portfolio, and that's a reduction of almost 3 million square feet. So we've been very successful so far, but I anticipate a lot more to come.
with 27,000 plus employees going home, like you said, almost overnight, probably not the ideal way to learn how a workforce can work remotely. But since it did happen, and now we're over a year into it, what did you learn about remote work and how we can use that to adjust maybe some of our facilities goals going forward?
All right, so some of the lessons that we learned through the pandemic, I would say the first one is that employees can adapt to new situations better than maybe we would have thought was possible. What we've seen over the last year is that employees have done a great job. We've seen some areas where they've actually been more productive working in a remote setting than they were in the office. The other big take home is the technology exists for us to work remotely. The technology exists for us to be able to do those things, to communicate, to collaborate, and to do it securely. And I think those are the big take-home messages, and those are the things that will inform the way we work in the future and the way that we look at remote work and hybrid work and the way that we can create more flexibility for employees, and then that creates different needs for the space in our buildings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So with some of these barriers of the past being broken down now and broken down rather quickly, what are your thoughts then on the future of remote work in state government itself, and what opportunities exist, and what also with that, I'm sure that it's not all perfect. What challenges do we still face?
Yeah, there are certainly benefits to continuing with remote work for probably most industries, but speaking on behalf of state government here. So first of all, because the world has changed, we all need to keep up with that. And when it comes to staff attraction and retention, being able to provide flexible schedules, flexible work arrangements, that's going to be key. We know that it's not just a paycheck that's bringing people to work, and that they want work-life balance. They want flexibility. They want those things. And so for an employer that is not willing to look at that flexibility, that's going to be a big detriment to their ability to attract and retain in the future. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier, productivity has actually gone up in a lot of our areas. We've seen reduced use of sick time. We've seen improved SLAs when it comes to a lot of the work. And so not only can you potentially have happier employees because you're providing them more flexibility, you, in a lot of cases, are going to have more productive employees when they're working remotely. And then finally, and this is certainly something that's important, as we look at remote work, we need to be looking at not only how do we change our facilities footprint, but how can we reduce our facilities footprint? And that's, I think, for a lot of chief administrators, that's one of the goals. Many of us have stated goals to reduce our footprint. And in the past, it's a lot of the times you're nibbling around the edges to try and reduce that. But now we have a real opportunity to shrink the physical footprint of government, and that will translate into savings for the taxpayers.
What about any challenges that exist that still need to be overcome?
Yeah. Certainly there are challenges and concerns, and this is where we spend a lot of our time now working on it. We can measure productivity of work, and that's certainly one important metric that we look at. But the concerns include things like organizational culture and collaboration and inclusion. And how do you build those relationships? How do you build that work family that we all desire in a job if you're not going to see each other? And so I know that there's a lot of companies that do this really successfully, but this is one of the reasons why, at least in our agency, we're looking pretty strongly at a hybrid approach. So that while we will provide employees flexibility to be off-site, we will also have sometimes shared on-site together. So we can have those face-to-face conversations. You can have the water cooler conversations. You can just have the pop-ins and those more organic things. And so those are some of the things, those are some of the concerns that we have. It's just, we know the things that we can measure, but you can't measure everything. And so what are some of the intangibles that maybe you're missing out on if you move to 100% remote work culture? The other thing I would mention is it's just perception. I think a lot of us that work in state government know that there's a perception out there that maybe state employees don't work as hard as they should and things like that. Those of us that work in state government know that's not true. But with that perception out there, I think that's something else that we have to be cognizant of if all of a sudden it's announced that state employees are never going to work in a building again and it's going to be remote. And so we really need to make sure that we're dealing with that perception, because we are spending a lot of time on how do we build the culture, how do we build the relationships, how do we manage performance. And so those are the things that I would say if you're looking at concerns, but none of them can't be overcome. It's just things that we need to spend our time working on and coming up with ways to deal with.
Now, obviously, what we're talking about today is one of the top 10 goals that NASCA has set for the year around space optimization. So let's dig into a little bit about how you're taking some of these new possibilities and really putting them into action. What are some of the things that are translating into real change, and what is the first step to making those changes?
Yeah, we get a lot of questions about, well, how much are you going to reduce your real estate footprint tomorrow? And I can walk you through the way that we're approaching this, but it certainly doesn't start with the real estate footprint. As we work with the agencies, the number one consideration is always the needs of the customers. It's always, how do you provide the best service to your customers, no matter what business that is. And so from there, then we start to look at things like, well, how does remote work? How does that fit into that? So is it possible to provide the best possible service to your customers and provide your employees flexibility with remote work? And for a lot of the areas that we've been talking to, that answer is yes, we can do that. And so now you have the benefit of A, focusing on your customers, B, being able to provide the flexibility for employees so that we can attract and retain the best. And then we start to look at, once you've done that, you start to look at, well, what does the schedule look like if we're going to have remote work? And how much time, employee time, is reduced in the office? And then you can start to look at your space and say, okay, if I only have people here 2 days a week or 3 days a week, do I have an opportunity now to shrink that footprint because maybe they need fewer square feet each in their workstations? Maybe they can share workstations. Maybe they can do things like that. And then we start to work with the agencies to figure out where are their efficiencies in space and where can we potentially reduce that. The other thing I would talk about, and that we'll focus on a little bit more later, is the space will look different. Like I said, maybe individual workstations are a little bit smaller. There's probably going to be more shared space. There's probably going to be more collaborative space, because that's what you're going to spend your time doing when you're in the office. We also need to think about things like storage and how to, if I'm sharing my desk with someone on alternating days, where do I keep my things when I'm not there? So there's a lot of considerations that we need to look at. But again, I just can't stress this enough. It starts with the business need and meeting customers' needs, and everything trickles down from there.
So with those things now in place, to actually optimize space, which is once again what our goal is here ultimately, what do you need to do to reduce that footprint? Now that we're talking about remote work, that's great, but how do you actually put that into action and make it reduce the amount of office space that you're utilizing?
So the opportunity that we're looking at right now is, with remote work, can we create a more fundamental change in the way that we do space in the state? And at the end of the day, it's going to require big changes for employees if we want to fundamentally or drastically reduce our footprint. It's going to require things like not only the smaller cube sizes, but people sharing space. So on one day I might use the desk, the next day you might use the desk. And so now we go from having 2 workstations to 1 workstation. And I don't want to suggest that that's easy. That's a big mindset change for employees, going from I have my workstation, I can decorate it the way that I want to, I have the pictures of my kids, I can leave my favorite pen right there next to the keyboard. And so that's a really, really big change in the approach to space. But I can tell you the way I've approached it, and I'll tell you what I'm doing with my director's office suite. The way I've approached it with employees is I've made it more of a conversation with them. And so we sat down and we said, what would you be willing to trade to ensure that you have flexibility with remote work in the future? What would be some fair trade-offs for you if I'm willing to guarantee that flexibility for you? And we asked the question, well, would you be willing to have a smaller workspace? And to a person, they all say yes. If that's going to guarantee me some flexibility, yes, I would. Would you be willing to share your workspace? Meaning on a day that you're not there, someone else use it. And to a person, everyone has said yes. If that's going to guarantee that I continue to have flexibility and I can work remotely a couple days a week, yeah, I am willing to make those trade-offs. And so this is really the approach that we're looking at, is if you fundamentally, or if you really want to drastically reduce space, it has to be some version of sharing. And so I can tell you what we're doing with our director's office. We found another area of DTMB that has about the same footprint, totally unrelated to the work that we do here, other than the fact that we're in the same agency. And we are taking them out of their building and putting them into our building, into our suite with us. And as you can imagine, this is a big change. So the way that we envision this working is, you might rotate weeks, and on one week, on a Monday, the director's office is here, and we're all sitting in the offices and the cubicles. On a Tuesday, the director's office is working remotely, and this other area of DTMB is sitting here in the offices and the cubicles. So it takes some coordination. It takes some flexibility on the part of employees, and it takes us, certainly we have to consider different things. Like I said, where do you store your coffee cup? Where do you do things like that? But by doing this allows us to cut our footprint in half for those two offices. And so you're looking at remote work about half of the time. So about every other day, these employees will be remote. But we think that that's a good trade-off, and we can save a lot of money by cutting that space in half.
To see what some of these design changes look like, Brom and I were able to meet up with one of the department's lead interior designers, Jamie Filippo, to visit an office that has started to transition to a hybrid workspace. So I just wanted to talk through some of the elements with you guys and really showcase what we're doing to make this work for employees. So where we come here first, we've got some hotel space, right, that we're going to use for staff that's not necessarily going to be in the office all the time. Can you explain a little bit about what are some of the design elements here?
Yeah, what we really wanted to do is give a clean slate that anybody could drop into kind of as needed. We made sure that, it's adequate work surface space so that people can really sprawl out and work. Also a height adjustable surface to make sure to focus on ergonomics, having power at the desktop. Also to make it so people don't have to crawl under the desk, and then focusing on keeping it light and open so when you do have teammates next to each other, they can still interact when they do come into the office. Yeah, and so really kind of changing that feel and vibe in an office of much more collaborative. So we do have this, and I think that the openness is appropriate here. But we also will still have executives that need to have confidential conversations. So I think as we move this way a little bit, we have integrated some floor to ceiling, more traditional type of offices that you would see for a manager or supervisor in an area. So can you explain a little bit about what went into this design? So these are 2 rooms that'll be used by 2 directors. It will be used as their private office, but also when they aren't in the office, there will be TVs in these rooms, and they can be used as small meeting spaces. And one of the things chosen was to have glass to keep that visual openness to allow them to be more approachable for all of the staff that will be coming in and out of the space. Okay. And so, Brom, for you, from an executive perspective, why is it important to have, these floor-to-ceiling offices and really some confidential areas?
Yeah, well, clearly we know that managers and supervisors and directors still need to be able to have those confidential conversations, whether it's an HR conversation or whether it's just one of the hard conversations that you have to have with staff that don't lend themselves to being had out in the open. And so that's why we knew it was important to keep some floor-to-ceiling spaces. Like Jamie said, we do like the glass here, though, because while this may be assigned to one director, on days when that director is not here, it will be used by other people in the area. And so it makes it easier to see. Is someone already using the space? And like Jamie said, you don't have to worry about knocking on the door and interrupting someone's meeting. So
that's a good point.
We always know when the space is open so it can get more utilization.
Yeah, so once again, a dual purpose that it serves, just like almost everything else that we're talking about here today.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing I would add is there's a lot of great innovations in the space here that we're using. But the other thing we got to get right is it's not just about having the space configured right. It's about having the norms and having people understand what they need to do when they're going to share space. And so we'll certainly have norms that everyone agrees to. So even though this may be my office, it's expected that when I leave at the end of the day, it's a clean desk. There's no, whether it's food or whether it's papers or whether it's even photos of your family, clean desk policy so that anyone can use it when you're not here. And that's really how we can maximize the use of the space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we move down here a little bit, we talked about that a little bit earlier and being a mindset change a little bit, that you don't have the personal effects and things at your desk. It's really a transient space a little bit more, even for a director. So the other thing that this office in particular has are some employees that are going to be working full-time 40 hours a week in the office. So we have some space here that's designed for them, correct?
Yeah. The main differences in the spaces that are set up to be occupied 40 hours a week by a single occupant, they have a little bit more space per workstation. We've added glass panels to allow it to feel a little bit more private, and then also adding in those storage items because they will have reference material that's going to need to stay here day in and day out as they work. Another design way that we utilized this space was taking the people who will be here 40 hours a week and allowing them to have windows and closer access to sunlight. And
I think that's just a smart little tweak that you're right. Those that are going to be in the office all the time, having that natural light is a huge benefit.
Absolutely.
And one thing that we've tried to do with this new hybrid work is we know that there are different needs for different employees. And so we have the conversation with the staff and say, who wants to be here 40 hours a week? We know that some people do for a lot of reasons. And then with the people who do want to work a more hybrid or spend some days out of the office, we talk about this in terms of a trade-off. Okay, we're willing to give the flexibility for you to work somewhere else, but are you in turn then willing to have some flexibility and maybe work at hoteling stations and other things so that we can shrink our real estate footprint?
Yeah, adaptability seems to be the theme here with everything that we're talking about.
Certainly is.
So with that, there's obviously some things that come up with transient type of space, hoteling space. One of those may be the ability to have phone conversations, because we talked about the openness being a benefit, but it can also be a hindrance when we're talking about confidential conversations that they need to have, whether they be personal phone calls or some to do with their professional life. So what do we have here that's helped with that?
We like to call these our phone rooms, but they're, again, the adaptability and multi-use space that we like to talk about. So it's a space that the door can be closed, it can be a private meeting space. There will also be technology added to allow it to be a space to be able to interact with our teammates who aren't on site during the days, basically teleconferencing in our other staff. And then we've added movable chairs and table to allow this to kind of flex and be used as one-on-one meeting spaces or other things.
Okay. And then the other issue that folks may have in some of the hoteling spaces is that there will be personal effects. We talk about keeping the desk clean, but you're going to have things like jackets. I mean, we live in Michigan. There's a good portion of the year, jackets, maybe even boots on certain days, What do we do about that? Where do employees keep that sort of stuff?
Yep, so instead of having dedicated space within stations and then making it be where people have to go to the same station every day, we've started a communal locker area. So basically it allows for a coat, boots, and things like reference materials or maybe your keyboard, stuff like that, to allow the clean desk policy over in the stations that are shared, but you can still keep those items you need on site when you leave for the day. And then they can just close it and lock it, take the key, and know that it will be here next time.
Yeah, that's great. And that also works for files and their office supplies type of things that you would normally have at a desk. All right, so now, finally, we get to some collaborative space because everybody, they may not all be in the office on the same day, but there are times you probably want to have that. But also just having that vibe, that feeling that you need when you're in the office that you don't get from not having dedicated desks anymore. How did we kind of go about that, at least in this area?
Well, we like to make sure that our spaces, as we're changing our mindset and how we're using the spaces, that we really have spaces that allow people to still get together and have that teamwork and camaraderie. One way we like to do that is to have open, more lounge type seating. Allows them to have informal meetings or just a casual conversation or strategize in different ways. This space over here will eventually be a coffee bar.
Oh, okay.
So they can sit and, have refreshments as they, take a break.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. And so Brom, I know you've talked about this, about not losing the culture.
Yeah.
Why is some of this space important?
Yeah, well, if you think about it now, if you walk through an office, you'll see that each cubicle or office is decorated. People bring in pictures of their family. They, some people put up Christmas lights. We see a wide range of things. And people do this because they want to make it feel like home. They want to feel comfortable when they come to their workspace. Now, with a clean desk policy, that isn't possible. So part of the norms and part of the things that we expect to do is that in common areas like this, we would allow them to decorate. So if there are some people that want to put up holiday decorations or Thanksgiving decorations, whatever that would be, we would allow them to do things like that. I would also expect to see, once the office is finished, cork boards and things like that, where maybe they can stick up pictures of their son or daughter who is graduating, or their new pet and that kind of thing. We don't want to make the office sterile. We don't want it to feel like you're coming into a doctor's office. We want people to feel comfortable when they come here, and part of that is them being able to make their mark, so to say, on some of the common areas.
Yeah, and I think that's great. So as all of this, you take it all together as kind of an ecosystem, it all starts to make sense and really does, like you said, some give and take from both the employees and the employer, but really does kind of fill itself out and really work as a functioning hybrid office environment. So thanks for walking us through there. So the talking about that's a big radical change for employees, and it is a huge mindset shift that they're going to have. And you said that you had conversations with the actual employees to kind of get a feel for their thoughts on it. What were some of those conversations like?
Yeah, it is. It because it's such a big change, it's really important that you have trust to make this work. I mean, that's always important in this work, and that's why we take employee engagement so seriously. But the conversations are, look, here's what I'll commit to you. If we're all willing to take this leap together and give this a shot, what I'm willing to commit to you is I will get you the things you need to do your job. I will get you everything you need. I'm not going to promise that I'm going to give you necessarily everything you want, but I'll try. I'll try to get you the things you want. And so we interviewed every single employee and to look at that and say, what are your needs on a daily basis? If you're going to be in the office 2 to 3 times a week, what do you need when you come into that space? Do you need dual monitors? Do you need a desk phone? Do you need a locker? What are the things you need? And so by doing this, and then we also talk about their preferences. Would you prefer a traditional cubicle, or would you prefer open space most of the time? And so, by doing these things, we can really talk directly to the employees, find out what their needs are, and then the challenge for us is trying to figure out that kind of Tetris puzzle. How do we put all those needs together and accommodate all of them in this space? I'll say the other good thing, the positive feedback we're hearing from employees is they're getting things that they haven't had in the past. One of the interesting things we heard from the communications department in my office, as well as this other area of DTMB, is they've both for a long time wanted a video editing space, and they didn't ever have that space. And it's always been, boy, that seems kind of pricey. How do we do it? But now we look at that and we think we can justify it. A, because we're cutting our space in half and we're saving a lot of money there. But B, now we're buying one video editing space, or paying for, creating one video editing space, paying for it once, and both areas can use it. And so employees are they're very positive about changes like that. They're also very positive about the fact that we're telling them, if you don't necessarily want a standard traditional cubicle, we'll create open space for you to work. They love it, and so it's not rocket science. It's just like anything else you do in engagement. Talk to your people, level with them, tell them what you will commit to and what, maybe you can't commit to. Be honest with them, but most importantly, listen to their needs and act on it. The other thing I would say as part of that planning is it's really the buy-in and from leadership, and leadership, making themselves part of the situation. I've told everyone, just like you, I have an office, but because we're combining space and we're going to be maybe a little bit tighter, we won't have as much excess as we have in the past. If people need my office for a meeting, I'm more than happy to step out and go sit in a cube and let people use my office. And so I think it's important that this goes throughout the whole leadership, that everyone is committed to this, that everyone is saying, it's not you will make the sacrifice and you will share desks, but we won't. That's not going to work. I think we all have to really be in this together for this to work. And so part of that, you're talking about planning, which is much more than just this, but I think when employees see that there's buy-in all the way up the leadership and we're all going to be doing the same thing, I think that speaks to employees a lot, and I think that helps you get buy-in, and it'll ultimately make people happier with the situation.
So what about the cost of making a transition like this? What have you seen in your initial planning here, and how you can maybe actually reutilize furniture or do things to save on the initial cost that you're going to face?
What we've found is that with the plan that we're working on here in this space, it's not that expensive. We're able to, we have all of our cubicles, everything can be configured differently. And so we're able to use all the stock that we already have. We're also able to reuse a lot of the furniture from the other area of DTMB. They had already done a little work in creating some open spaces and collaborative spaces. And so we're able to actually just reuse all of that. Look, certainly there are going to be some costs. Whenever you restack space, whenever you move people, there are always some upfront costs. But we're very confident that those will very quickly be recouped because we've reduced our footprint.
Okay. We've covered a lot here. And a lot of it is very positive, and I think we have you have a good outlook for how this is really going to make some positive change going forward. But what are you've got to have some concerns. There's probably a few things about this that keep you up at night a little bit. What are your biggest concerns about jumping into this new model?
Well, like with anything, my biggest concern is around the people, and how do we continue to support our people, and how do we continue to provide an environment where they can do their work and be productive and feel positive about the environment that we've given them as space. And so if I rewind a year and a half, I can tell you I wasn't a big proponent of remote work. And maybe it was a little bit old-fashioned, but it was, no, we're going to be here, we're going to work together, we're going to all be in the same room, and we're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to solve problems like this. And so what I've realized over the last 14 months, as I look at the stats on productivity, as I look at engagement numbers, as I just talk to employees, it does work. Remote work does work. And so I guess what I'm saying here is I was wrong, but I didn't know that. But it's really hard as a leader when you have to take a stance on something and then you have to come back and admit that maybe you were wrong. And so I can look back now and say, hey, look, my approach wasn't right. And the last 14 months have proved that for me. But I think in the future, it's going to be even more important because it's an experiment for us. I'm bringing another group into my area to prove that it can work, to prove that we can cut our space in half and be as or more productive as we were in the past, and have our people be happy. But I also have to be willing to admit that, hey, maybe we got some things wrong. Maybe we scheduled it wrong. Maybe we made some mistakes on the space. And so I think that's one big thing, that we just need to be willing to adapt. And all of us, hopefully we can be forgiving with each other and just look at this and say, this is new, it's an experiment. We're doing the best we can, and we're trying to come up with the best answers. And again, kind of, to the employees, say our commitment is, if we got something wrong, let's come back and fix it, and let's find a better way to do it. So, like I would say, the biggest concerns are just that we do something that is detrimental to our people. We have to get it right for our employees.
Yeah, no, that's important. And I think, like you talked about earlier, the planning that you're putting into it, it's not like you're jumping into it blind. A lot of work's going into making sure that you are providing what the staff needs and supporting them along the way. So finally, having gone through all this, and we have our NASCA audience out there, what are some things that you could share from a leadership level that other leaders might want to consider when discussing and going through these similar decision-making processes going forward?
Well, first and foremost, I would say, and you've heard me say this before, get input. Talk to your people. I think it's very important that as leaders, we have the humility to know that we don't have all the answers, and that by talking with all of our employees and understanding their needs and understanding their opinions, we will come up with a better answer. So it's being humble enough, like I talked about earlier, to admit you were wrong. It's being humble enough to say someone else might have a better answer than me. And by doing that and by working with everyone, you come up with a good answer. Another thing I would say is just be comfortable getting out of your comfort zone a little bit. Like I say, remote work wasn't my thing 14 months ago. And now I think, I'm a pretty strong advocate for being able to do this in the state of Michigan. I think it's the right answer. I was wrong. I was wrong about it, and I've learned, and I've looked at what's out there, and I'm willing to say that my approach wasn't right, and I've changed it. And so I think getting out of the comfort zone and just being humble and just doing this, I think these are the really things that we need to do as leaders.
Yeah, well, I think you left a really great takeaway there that I haven't heard before, but people need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if we can leave people with that one and you take that to heart, I think we've done a good job. So thank you, Brom, for taking the time here today. I think we've covered a lot of great stuff, and it should be very helpful for those out there considering the same things.
No, I certainly hope so. I'm glad to talk.
Thanks, Brom, for showing us around the DTMB offices in Michigan. It's been so beneficial to visualize how you've optimized space in your state and decided to co-locate 2 offices in the same space. We've heard from NASCA members that moving to a remote or a hybrid workforce is beneficial to improve productivity, enhance the work-life balance, attract and retain state employees, support diversity and inclusion, and it also lowers the strain on the transportation infrastructure. You heard Brom offer several key points and things to consider when looking to reduce your physical footprint and embrace a hybrid workforce. First, the goal should always be to create efficiencies and reduce costs while ensuring the best services are provided to the citizens of your state. Ultimately, your focus is on your customers and guaranteeing that programs are implemented without interruption, projects continue to be executed in a timely fashion, and overall trust in government remains high. Seamless execution of the agency or department initiatives is key to a positive public perception. Second, talk to your team and learn what motivates them. Find the most appropriate work-life balance and do so with flexible work arrangements. There'll be some give and take, but this will be beneficial to your staff when you as leaders hear their concerns and address their needs. Many employees find they are more productive in a hybrid environment, so find those opportunities to engage them in the planning. As we know, many states are seeing greater productivity when employees have flexibility and choice. In the post-pandemic world, focus on the intersection between human factors of your team, space optimization, and the necessary technology needs to implement your agency or department strategic activities. Third, know that a hybrid workplace pushes you to focus on organizational culture. deliberate efforts for inclusion, and thoughtful collaboration activities. The water cooler conversations may be more limited, so find those situations to build relationships through common space, open areas for discussion, and perhaps even those coffee bars like you saw in Michigan. Finally, know that one size doesn't fit all as you consider your space needs. States are adapting to the post-pandemic environment and using this time to rethink space allocation. Each agency, department, and state is different, and their plans will vary according to the culture, function, workforce expectations, size, location, and technology. A sound process is needed to accurately address these characteristics to ensure a robust employee experience while maintaining citizen-facing functions. By targeting the nature of the work along with the workplace expectations, we'll allow for a set of policies and practices that will optimize the space, empower your staff in their roles, increase productivity, and ensure the best work-life balance. Again, I want to thank Brom and Kayla from the Michigan Department of Technology, Management, and Budget for sharing their experience with us today. Stay tuned for the next episode in NASCA Connections, which will be coming soon.